Nobody in the bar believed he would stay. A weary bartender in a worn shirt, eyes familiar with long nights and longer mornings. A billionaire walked in, carrying the scent of money and power and a smile that had never been refused. Just 5 minutes, she thought. 5 minutes before he crumbled. 5 minutes before he realized he didn't belong in her world. But 5 minutes passed, then 30, then the entire night. And for the first time in her life, she lost a bet not because of money, but because of a man who chose protecting his son over conquering her. Daniel Cross wiped down the mahogany bar for the 3rd time that hour. The wood grain had long since memorized the pattern of his cloth, circular and methodical, like everything else in his life. Outside the windows of North Harbor Bar, Ravenport's old shipyard district glowed under sodium lights, casting orange shadows across rain-slicked cobblestones. 32 years old. Night shift bartender. Law student by day when he could stay awake long enough to absorb constitutional precedents and tort reform. Single father to a 7-year-old boy who asked questions Daniel didn't always have energy to answer. His mother was dying. Stage 4. The hospice nurse came twice a week now, and the bills came daily. This was Daniel's world. Responsibility stacked on top of exhaustion, held together by coffee and the bone-deep knowledge that giving up wasn't an option. Not when Leo drew pictures of superheroes at the kitchen table. Not when his mother still smiled when he visited, even though the morphine made her forget his name sometimes. The bar's owner, Marcus, poked his head out from the back office. "Quiet tonight? You can close early if you want." Daniel shook his head. "I'll stay the full shift." Every hour mattered. Every tip. The law school debt didn't care about tired eyes or a child waiting at home with a babysitter who charged by the quarter hour. He'd stopped dreaming somewhere around year 3 of this routine. Dreams required energy Daniel allocated elsewhere, to Leo's school supplies, to his mother's comfort care, to the small apartment that leaked when it rained but cost less than anywhere else in Ravenport. Romance? He'd tried once, 2 years ago. A dental hygienist named Sarah who smiled pretty and laughed at his jokes. 3 dates in, she'd met Leo. 5 dates in, she'd realized Daniel's life had no room for spontaneity, no space for weekend getaways or late dinners that ended in her apartment instead of his. She'd been kind about it. "You're a great guy, Daniel. But you're not available." Not really. She was right. So he'd stopped trying, stopped looking, stopped letting himself notice when attractive women sat at his bar and made eye contact that lingered a second too long. "Not every opportunity is worth taking," he told Leo once, when his son asked why Daddy didn't have a girlfriend like Tommy's dad did. Leo had accepted this with the easy wisdom of children who trust their parents implicitly. Daniel wished he had that same faith in his own choices. The rain picked up outside, drumming against the windows. Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, he could start the closing procedures. In 45 minutes, he'd be home. In 6 hours, he'd wake Leo for school, make breakfast, catch 3 hours of sleep, then head to his morning contracts class. The door opened. Daniel looked up reflexively, preparing his professional smile, the one that said welcome without promising anything more. Then he saw her. Victoria Hale didn't walk into rooms. She entered them, changed them, owned them before the door closed behind her. Tonight she wore a charcoal coat that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, designer but understated. Dark hair pulled back, minimal jewelry, face that didn't need the makeup it wore expertly. Mid-30s, he guessed, maybe 40, the kind of age that money made ageless. But it was her eyes that made him pause mid-wipe of the already clean bar. Tired eyes. Searching eyes. The same eyes he saw in his own mirror, just wrapped in a different kind of exhaustion. She chose a seat at the far end of the bar, away from the 2 regulars nursing their beers and pretending not to watch her. The kind of seat someone picked when they wanted space, but didn't want to be completely alone. Daniel approached with his professional smile firmly in place. "Evening." "What can I get you?" "Scotch," she said. Her voice was silk over steel. "Neat. Whatever you have that's not trying too hard." He appreciated the specificity. Too many people in expensive coats ordered drinks they'd seen in movies. Things that required muddling and garnishes and 3 different liqueurs Daniel had to dig out from the back shelf. He poured her a Glenlivet 15, good enough to satisfy, not so precious it came with a story. She took it without comment, without the usual small talk about brands or proof or whether he had anything smoother. Just lifted the glass, sipped, and nodded once. "Thank you," she said. Then, silence. Daniel returned to his closing prep, monitoring her peripherally the way bartenders learned to do, making sure the glass stayed full enough, empty enough, watching for the signs someone wanted conversation or wanted to be left alone. 10 minutes passed. She didn't check a phone, didn't open a laptop, just sat with her scotch and her thoughts, staring at nothing in particular. Usually, this was when men approached. The regulars. The guys who saw an attractive woman alone and interpreted it as invitation. Daniel had his speech prepared. The polite version of "she's not interested" that kept the peace. But tonight, before any of them could move, Victoria spoke. "Long shift?" she asked. Daniel paused in his inventory count. "Every shift is long here. You say that like you have somewhere else to be." "Home," he said simply. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "No drink after work? No unwinding?" "I unwind by sleeping." A small smile. Practical. Necessary. She sipped her scotch. "You're not what I expected." Daniel resumed counting bottles. "What did you expect? Small talk, flirting, the usual dance when someone like me sits at a bar like this." "Someone like you? You know what I mean." He did. The coat, the posture, the way she held her glass like she was used to holding things worth holding. "I don't dance," Daniel said. Not coldly, just factually. For the first time since she'd entered, Victoria laughed. Not the polite social laugh of networking events and board meetings. Something genuine. "No," she said. "I don't think you do." She finished her scotch, placed the glass down gently. Daniel expected her to signal for the check. Instead, she said, "Tell me something true." Daniel looked at her fully then. Saw past the coat and the confidence to something underneath. Something lonely. "I have a son," he said. 7 years old. "He's the only true thing I know." Victoria's expression shifted. Not disappointment. Something else. Recognition, maybe. "What's his name?" "Like the lion. Like the constellation." His mother chose it. Daniel caught himself. His mother isn't. "We're not. You're raising him alone," Victoria finished. She nodded slowly. Signaled for another scotch. When Daniel poured it, she wrapped both hands around the glass, as if cold despite the bar's warmth. "I built an empire," she said quietly. 12 countries. 4,000 employees. She looked up at him, and I've never felt more invisible than I do right now. "Because you're the first person in 6 months who's looked at me without calculating what I'm worth." Daniel said nothing. Because what could he say to that? That he understood? That he'd spent 3 years being invisible to everyone except his son and his dying mother, but his silence, the quality of it, seemed to be what she needed. "Thank you," Victoria said. "For what?" Daniel didn't ask. The 2 regulars left around 12:30, stumbling into the rain with mumbled goodnights. Marcus had long since gone home, trusting Daniel with the closing. The bar settled into that particular quiet of late nights, not empty, but intimate. Just 2 people and the rain. Victoria had moved closer, not in a predatory way, but like someone gradually warming to a fire. Still 1 seat between them, still respectful of boundaries. "Tell me about Leo," she said. Usually, Daniel deflected personal questions. But something about the hour, the rain, the exhaustion in her eyes that matched his own, it loosened something. "He wants to be a firefighter," Daniel said. Last week it was an astronaut. Next week it'll probably be something else. He's 7. The world is still full of possibilities, but not for you. Daniel dried a glass that was already dry. I used to want to be a prosecutor. Put away the people who hurt others. Noble, right? Self-righteous college kid thinking he could fix the world. Why didn't you? Life? Daniel said. Leo's mother left when he was 2. Said she wasn't ready to be a parent. I was barely ready myself. But ready doesn't matter when you're the only one left. Then my mother got sick. Law school had to wait. Everything had to wait. But you're still studying. Night classes. Online courses. It takes longer this way. But, he shrugged. Leo needs to see that giving up isn't an option. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, my father built Hale Group from nothing. Steel mills, back when America still made steel. He died when I was 23, and everyone expected me to sell. A young woman, no business experience, grief-stricken, easy target. But you didn't sell. I tripled the company's value in 5 years, diversified, moved into tech, real estate, green energy. Made Forbes's most powerful women list before I turned 30. She stared into her scotch. Want to know the truth? Do I? I'm not sure I like the person I became getting there. Ruthless, calculating. Every relationship a transaction. Every conversation a negotiation. She looked at him. When was the last time you had a conversation that wasn't about your son, your mother, or your responsibilities? Daniel almost lied. Then didn't. I can't remember. When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed? Leo told a knock-knock joke last week. That doesn't count. Why not? Because that's you being a parent. I'm asking about you, Daniel. The person underneath the dad, the bartender, the law student, the son. When was the last time you were just you? The question struck deeper than it should have. Daniel set down the glass he was holding. I don't know if there is a just me anymore, he admitted. Every part of who I am is connected to someone who needs me. Victoria nodded slowly. I have the opposite problem. Every part of who I am is separate from everyone else. I'm the CEO, the boss, the woman with the corner office and the driver who waits outside. People smile at me because of what I can do for them, not because of who I am. Is that why you're here? In this bar? In this neighborhood? Maybe, she said. Or maybe I'm just tired of being Victoria Hale for a few hours. Who are you, then? She smiled, genuinely smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. I have no idea. Isn't that pathetic? 37 years old, and I don't know who I am when nobody's watching. You're someone who drinks Glenlivet without pretense, Daniel offered. Someone who asks real questions. Someone who said thank you to a bartender and meant it. Low bar. You'd be surprised how many people clear it. Victoria laughed then. Not the polite laugh from earlier. Something fuller, freer. The sound of it changed the air between them, like a window opening in a closed room. God, she said. When was the last time someone made me laugh without trying? Does Leo's knock-knock joke count? Tell me the joke. Knock-knock. Who's there? Victoria played along. Interrupting cow. Interrupting cow, moo. Daniel did his best 7-year-old impression, complete with enthusiastic arm movements. Victoria laughed so hard she nearly knocked over her scotch. The sound filled the empty bar, genuine and unguarded and completely at odds with the powerful woman who'd walked in 3 hours ago. When she caught her breath, her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright. Thank you, she said again. This time, Daniel understood what she was thanking him for. They talked until 2 a.m., about nothing consequential. Books they'd read, movies they'd almost seen but never had time for, the particular loneliness of being responsible for everything. Victoria never mentioned her company's name. Daniel didn't ask. Some part of him suspected she was more than she appeared, but some part of him didn't want to know. It was easier this way, two people in a bar, stripped of context. Finally, she checked her watch. I should go. Daniel nodded, already calculating the tip he wouldn't accept because she'd given him something more valuable than money. A few hours of conversation that didn't cost him anything emotionally. Victoria pulled out her phone the first time she'd touched it all night. Have dinner with me, she said. Thursday. Somewhere quiet. The invitation hung in the air between them. Daniel felt the pull of it. The temptation. When was the last time a woman had asked him to dinner? When was the last time he'd wanted to say yes? I can't, he said. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shuddered. I see. No, Daniel said quickly. It's not, he stopped. Started again. I don't do this. Dating, going out, any of it. Not because I don't want to, because I can't afford to. Afford? She glanced around the bar. I'm paying, Daniel, not that kind of afford. He leaned against the bar, trying to find words for something he'd never had to explain before. Leo is 7. He's at the age where he gets attached easily. If I bring someone into his life even peripherally and it doesn't work out, he's the one who pays the price, not me. I wasn't suggesting you introduce me to your son. No, but that's where it would go eventually. If this, whatever this is, continued. And then what? You're Victoria Hale. He saw her eyes widen slightly at the name. Yes, I figured it out about an hour ago. Tech billionaire. Forbes cover. The woman who turned her father's steel company into a green energy empire. He'd looked her up mentally, piecing together details from business news he'd absorbed during stolen moments between classes. So, you know, Victoria said flatly. So I know you're not looking for something permanent in a bar in Ravenport's Dock District at midnight on a Tuesday. And that's fine. You don't owe me permanent. But I can't do temporary, not when my son is involved, not when he stopped himself. Not when what? Not when I can already feel myself wanting to say yes. The honesty of it surprised them both. Victoria stood slowly. For a moment, Daniel thought she might argue. Rich people were used to getting what they wanted, and he'd just refused her, something money couldn't buy. Instead, she nodded. You're protecting him. She paused. That's rare. Most men I meet are so busy trying to impress me they forget about the people who depend on them. I don't have the luxury of forgetting. She pulled on her coat, buttoned it against the rain that hadn't stopped. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, she said, I think Leo is lucky to have a father who loves him more than he wants things for himself. Then she was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Daniel stood alone in his empty bar, wondering why doing the right thing felt so much like loss. Victoria sat in the back of her town car, rain streaming down the windows, and made herself a promise. She'd never been good at accepting no. Not when investors told her a woman couldn't run a steel company. Not when competitors tried to buy her out. Not when the board of directors suggested politely but firmly that she step down and let someone more experienced take over. She'd built her empire on refusing to accept no as a final answer. But this was different. Daniel Cross wasn't a business rival or a skeptical investor. He was a man with principles, protecting a child who trusted him, and Victoria found herself respecting those principles even as they frustrated her. Miss Hale? Her driver, Marcus, different Marcus from the bar, caught her eye in the rearview mirror. Home? Yes, she said. Then, softer. No. Drive. They drove through Ravenport streets, past the glittering downtown where Hale Group owned 3 buildings, past the renovated waterfront where her company's logo glowed in blue neon, to the old dock district where North Harbor Bar sat dark and closed. She was being ridiculous. She knew this. Victoria Hale didn't chase after bartenders. She had a company to run. A board meeting tomorrow today, now a merger to finalize in Singapore next week. but she couldn't stop thinking about the way Daniel had looked at her. Not with awe or calculation, but with the simple recognition of one exhausted person seeing another. No one looked at her like that. No one refused her like that. 5 minutes, she murmured. "Ma'am?" Marcus asked. Nothing. But an idea was forming. Not manipulation, not a transaction. Something else. "Marcus, what do you know about single fathers?" "My brother raises his daughter alone, ma'am. Wife passed 3 years ago. Does he date?" "No, ma'am." "Says it's too complicated, too much risk of his daughter getting hurt." Victoria nodded slowly. Daniel wasn't unique in his hesitation. He was simply one of the few men honest enough to name it. Most would have said yes to dinner, promised nothing, taken what they wanted, and disappeared. Daniel had refused the entire dance because he knew where it led. "What's the longest your brother went without adult companionship?" Victoria asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Going on 4 years now, ma'am. He's lonely. You can see it. But he doesn't trust anyone enough to risk his daughter's heart." "How would someone earn that trust?" "I don't think anyone can, ma'am. Not quickly. It would take time, patience. Proof that they wouldn't run when things got complicated." Victoria stared out at the rain. Time and patience. The two things her lifestyle made nearly impossible, unless she changed the lifestyle. "I bet myself 5 minutes, she said aloud. "Ma'am?" "That's how long I thought he'd last. 5 minutes before he started flirting. Before he saw the money and started calculating angles. 5 minutes before he became like everyone else." She smiled in the darkness of the car. "He stayed all night, talked to me like a person, turned me down to protect his son." She looked at Marcus in the mirror. "What would you do with a man like that?" "If I were you, ma'am, I'd figure out if I was willing to be the person he'd say yes to." Victoria leaned back in her seat. "That's either the most honest advice I've ever received, or the most devastating." "Both, probably, ma'am." She laughed quietly. "Drive home, Marcus. I have a board meeting in 6 hours and a decision to make about whether some things are worth being late for." But 2 days later, a delivery arrived at North Harbor Bar. A simple arrangement of books. Hardcovers. Daniel had mentioned in passing a legal thriller, a history of American labor movements, a children's book about constellations. No card, no name, just books. Daniel knew immediately who'd sent them, and despite himself, despite every logical reason to maintain distance, he smiled. She came back on Thursday. Daniel saw her through the window before she entered, standing in the rain, coat collar up, clearly debating whether to come in. This time, the bar was busier. Happy hour overflow, people escaping their own lives for a few hours. Daniel was managing 3 conversations at once, mixing drinks, running tabs, being the easy smile and listening ear that customers paid for. Victoria waited, not at the bar. At a small table in the corner, ordered a scotch from the floor server, and waited. Daniel finished his shift, closed out the register, told Marcus he needed 15 minutes before starting closing procedures. He sat across from Victoria without preamble. "The books, you mentioned them," she said simply. "That was a test." "No, it was a thank you. For Tuesday night, for treating me like a person instead of a bank account." Daniel studied her. She looked different tonight, less guarded, maybe. Or perhaps he was seeing her differently. "Why are you here, Victoria?" "Because you said no, and I respected it." "Because you're right, I don't do permanent. I don't do complicated. My relationships last as long as they're convenient, and then they end with lawyers and paperwork and everyone walking away civilly." She met his eyes. "But I've spent 2 days thinking about knock-knock jokes and the way you talk about your son. And I realized something." "What?" "I don't want to be the person who walks away civilly anymore. I want to be the person who stays uncomfortably, who tries when it's hard." "Who?" She stopped. "I'm not good at this, asking, being vulnerable. Usually I just decide what I want and acquire it. Despite himself, Daniel smiled. I'm not acquirable. I know. That's why I'm asking. She leaned forward. Have dinner with me. One dinner. With conditions, if you need them. Boundaries. Whatever makes this feel safe enough to try. He should say no again. For all the same reasons. Because Leo came first. Always. Because Victoria Hale's world and his world didn't overlap. Because temporary felt inevitable. And temporary would hurt. But God, he was tired of saying no to everything except responsibility. Conditions, he said slowly. No expensive restaurants. Somewhere normal. Somewhere I wouldn't feel like a charity case. Agreed. We don't talk about money, yours or mine. No offers to help, no suggestions about lawyers who could expedite my mother's insurance claims. No fixing. Agreed. And this doesn't involve Leo. Not yet. Maybe not ever. If this goes anywhere, we move at his pace. Not ours. Victoria nodded. What's his pace? Slow. Careful. He needs to trust someone before they become real to him. Like father. Like son. Exactly like that. Victoria extended her hand across the table. Do we have a deal, Daniel Cross? He looked at her hand. At her face. At the woman who'd built an empire but was sitting in a dock district bar negotiating terms like they were merger conditions. One dinner, he said, taking her hand. And if it doesn't feel right, we stop. No hard feelings. No hard feelings, she agreed. But they both knew in the way you sometimes know things before they happen that walking away wouldn't be that simple. Not anymore. Victoria chose a small Italian place in Ravenport's historic district, family-owned, red checkered tablecloths, the kind of restaurant that had been there for 40 years and would be there for 40 more. Not expensive. Not cheap. Just real. Daniel arrived first, which surprised him. He'd expected her to be the type who showed up exactly on time, assistant confirmed and calendar blocked. Instead, she hurried in 10 minutes late, hair slightly wind-messed, apologetic. Meeting ran over, she said, sliding into the booth. Construction delay at the Singapore site. I had to, she stopped. Sorry. No work talk, that was the rule. Your rule, or mine? Yours. But I think it's a good one. She shrugged off her coat, less expensive than the last one, he noticed. Still nice, but not CEO visiting the peasants nice. Tell me about your day. Constitutional law lecture. My professor has a theory that the Fourth Amendment is essentially dead, and he spent 2 hours explaining why. Leo has a field trip tomorrow, fire station, ironically, and I'm supposed to chaperone, but I have work. Can you miss work? Can't afford to. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel saw the impulse cross her face, offering money, offering to cover his shift, offering to solve the problem. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? Not offering to fix it. It's killing me, she admitted. I solve problems. It's what I do. Watching someone struggle with something I could resolve with one phone call is... She grimaced. Apparently, who I am is fixer who can't stop fixing. Who told you that? My last 3 relationships. Before they ended, she studied the menu without seeing it. I dated a professor once. Sweet man. Published poet. Within 3 months, I'd gotten his work optioned for a film adaptation, secured him a residency in Prague, and renovated his apartment building's heating system. And he left? He said he felt like a project. Like I was checking boxes. Acquire boyfriend, optimize boyfriend's life, move to next acquisition. She set down the menu. He wasn't wrong. But you're here. Not fixing anything. I'm trying very hard not to fix anything, Victoria said. It's surprisingly difficult. Their server arrived a grandmother type who called them both honey and recommended the puttanesca without being asked. They ordered wine neither of them knew anything about and split an appetizer they both wanted. Tell me about the prosecutor dream, Victoria said when the wine arrived. What kind of cases did you want to try? Daniel swirled his glass, watching the wine catch the light. Child welfare cases, domestic abuse, the kind of crimes where the victims are too scared or too young or too broken to speak for themselves. I wanted to be the voice for people who'd lost theirs. That's specific. My mother, before she got sick, she worked for social services. I grew up hearing about kids in impossible situations, parents who hurt them, systems that failed them. She'd come home some nights and just cry. Couldn't tell me details because of privacy laws, but I could see it breaking her heart, case by case. He took a sip of wine. I thought if I became a prosecutor, I could be the person who made sure those kids were safe, that the people who hurt them faced consequences. Why past tense? You're still studying law, because family law takes money, time, energy, for the emotional toll. And right now, I have none of those things in surplus. He shrugged. Maybe in another life, maybe when Leo's grown and my mother, he didn't finish the sentence. Victoria was quiet for a moment. My father used to say that postponing your dreams is just another way of abandoning them. That time doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. Your father ran a steel mill. He could afford to chase dreams. He started as a welder, worked 16-hour shifts, saved every penny, took risks that could have bankrupted him. He used to tell me, "Victoria, comfortable people don't build empires. Desperate people do." And you believed him. I became him, she said softly. For better or worse. I'm desperate in different ways now for success, for control, for something that feels like it matters. But desperation drives me the same way it drove him. Their food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. What would you do? Daniel asked. If money wasn't a factor. If Hale Group didn't exist tomorrow? Victoria set down her fork, considering. She stopped, laughed. I have no idea. Isn't that pathetic? Honest, maybe. Not pathetic. I've spent 15 years building something I'm not sure I even want. It's successful. It matters to thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on it. But if I'm being truthful, she met his eyes. I think I'd travel, not business trips where I see hotel conference rooms and airport lounges. Real travel, small towns, long train rides, places where nobody knows who I am. You could do that, could I? I have board meetings every Tuesday, projects in 12 countries. If I disappear for a week, 60 things go wrong. Then you've built a company that can't exist without you. That's not an empire, that's a prison. The words were harsher than Daniel intended. But Victoria didn't flinch. You're right, she said quietly. I've built a beautiful, successful prison, and I'm too afraid to leave it because I don't know who I am outside these walls. They looked at each other across the red checkered tablecloth, two people trapped in different ways, seeing their own reflection in the other's eyes. We're quite a pair, Victoria said finally. You can't chase your dreams because you have too many responsibilities. I can't chase mine because I have too much success. At least we're self-aware about it. That makes it better? No, Daniel admitted. But it's something. They finished dinner talking about smaller things, books, movies they'd never see. The particular humor of 7-year-olds. When the check came, Victoria reached for it automatically, and Daniel let her. Not because he couldn't pay, but because fighting over the bill felt like pretending they were something they weren't. Outside the restaurant, rain had started again, soft and steady, the kind of rain that felt permanent in Ravenport. I had a good time, Victoria said. Thank you for agreeing to this. I did too, Daniel admitted. Despite myself, despite your better judgment, despite being absolutely certain this is a terrible idea that will end badly. She smiled. And yet, I'd like to do it again. If you would. Victoria stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. Daniel Cross. Are you asking me on a second date? I'm negotiating terms for continued association. She laughed, the sound echoing off the wet street. God, you make romance sound like contract law. Lawyer in training. Occupational hazard. Then let me make a counteroffer. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number. When you have a night off, whenever that is, call me. We'll do this again. Something normal. Something that doesn't require either of us to be anyone except who we are right now. Daniel took her phone, typed in his number, handed it back. Fair warning, he said. I'm terrible at texting. I forget to respond for days. It's not personal. You're busy. You have a son and a dying mother and a full-time job and law school. I understand. Do you? Because in my experience, understanding and accepting are different things. Victoria tilted her head. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to be honest about what this is. I'm not. He struggled for words. I'm not good at casual. I can't be the guy who has fun for 3 months and then disappears. If we keep doing this, I'll get attached. And attachment is dangerous when our lives are this incompatible. Who says they're incompatible? Victoria, you run a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm a bartender who eats ramen 3 nights a week so I can afford Leo's school supplies. You're also a law student who wants to protect children. A father who's raising his son alone. A man who turned down a billionaire because his principles matter more than opportunity. She stepped even closer. Those things aren't incompatible with who I am. They're incompatible with who you think I am. Before he could respond, she kissed his cheek, quick, light, nothing presumptuous. Good night, Daniel. She walked to her car, not a town car tonight, Daniel noticed, but a simple sedan she drove herself and disappeared into the rain. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, hand touching his cheek where she'd kissed it, and wondered what he'd just gotten himself into. 3 weeks passed in fragments of time stolen between Daniel's obligations. Coffee on Tuesday morning before his class, Victoria in jeans and a sweater, looking almost ordinary. Lunch on Sunday, while Leo was at his grandmother's sandwiches in the park, rain threatening but never quite falling. Late-night phone calls after Daniel's shift, both of them too tired to perform, just talking in the dark. She didn't try to meet Leo, didn't push, didn't suggest changes to Daniel's life that would make room for her. And that restraint, that patience scared him more than anything, because it meant she was serious. It was Sunday evening, 3 weeks and 4 days since their first dinner, when the fear crystallized into words. Daniel had just put Leo to bed. The apartment was quiet except for the rain, always raining in Ravenport, and he sat at his kitchen table with cold coffee and an essay on habeas corpus reform he should have been writing. Instead, he called Victoria. Hi, she answered. He could hear traffic in the background. I'm just leaving the office. Long day. Singapore merger finally closed, and she stopped. Sorry, work talk. How was your day? Leo asked about you. Silence on the other end. Then, what did he ask? Who the lady was who sent me books. He saw the package before I could hide it. What did you tell him? That she was a friend. Daniel rubbed his eyes. He asked if she was my girlfriend. I said no. He asked if she could be. I said maybe. He asked if that meant he could meet her. More silence. And what did you say to that? Victoria asked carefully. I said not yet. That grown-up friendships are complicated. That I needed to be sure before I introduced him to anyone. Daniel took a breath. Then he said, You're scared, Daddy. 7-year-olds see everything. He's right. I am scared. Daniel stood, pacing the small kitchen. Victoria, I'm terrified. Because this isn't casual anymore. Because I think about you when I should be thinking about tort reform. Because I want to introduce you to Leo, and that want is exactly why I can't. Why not? Because he'll love you. The words came out raw. He's 7. He's lonely. He sees other kids with 2 parents, and he knows he only has one. If I bring you into his life, He'll attach to you immediately. He'll start drawing you pictures. He'll ask when you're coming over. He'll start planning a future where you're part of our family. Daniel, and when you leave, not if, when, because, let's be honest, Victoria, you have a life that doesn't include a broke bartender and his kid in Ravenport's dock district. When you leave, he's the one who gets hurt. Not me. Him. He heard her breathing on the other end of the line. Pull over, he said. What? If you're driving, pull over. This conversation doesn't happen while you're navigating traffic. A pause. Then the sound of a turn signal. Tires on gravel, an engine cutting off. Okay, she said. I'm pulled over. Are you going to leave? Is that what you think? That I'm entertaining myself with you until something better comes along? I think you're a woman who's used to getting what she wants and moving on when you're satisfied. I think 3 weeks is probably your record for sustained interest in anyone who wasn't a business acquisition. He expected anger. Defensiveness. Instead, Victoria laughed, but it was a bitter sound. You're not wrong, she said. My longest relationship was 11 months. Investment banker named Marcus, ironic. I know. Smart man, handsome. We made sense on paper. He proposed at a charity gala. 500 witnesses, perfect ring. What happened? I said yes. Because it made sense. Because I was 34 and everyone said it was time to settle down. We set a date, hired a planner, sent save the dates to 300 people. She was quiet for a moment. 2 weeks before the wedding, he asked me what I wanted to name our children someday. And I realized I'd never thought about it. Not once. Not in 11 months of dating. Not during the engagement. Not while planning a wedding. I'd been planning a wedding, not planning a life. So you called it off. I called it off. Returned the ring. Wrote a very large check to cover canceled vendor fees. Marcus told me I was incapable of love. That I treated people like spreadsheet entries. That I'd die alone because I could never care about anyone more than I cared about my company. Harsh. True, though. At the time. She took a breath. Daniel, I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I'm suddenly a different person. I don't know how to do this. Dating someone with a child. Building something slow. Being patient when every instinct tells me to accelerate timelines and optimize outcomes. Then why are we doing this? Because for the first time in my life, I want to learn how. Because when I'm with you, I don't think about quarterly earnings or expansion strategies or what the board expects. I think about knock-knock jokes and whether you've eaten today and how tired you look when you smile. Her voice softened. I think about what it would be like to be part of something that matters more than profit margins. Daniel sat down at his kitchen table, put his head in his free hand. I can't afford for you to learn how with my son's heart, he said quietly. I know. If you're not sure if there's any doubt, we stop now. Before Leo knows your name. Before this becomes real to him. Daniel, it's already real to me. But is it permanent? The question hung between them. I don't know, Victoria said finally. I've never done permanent. I don't know if I'm capable of it. But I want to be. For the first time in my life, I want to try. Trying isn't enough. Not when a 7-year-old is involved. Then what do you want from me? A guarantee? A promise that I'll never leave, never hurt you, never fail. Her voice cracked slightly. I can't give you that. Nobody can. Not even people who aren't billionaire workaholics with commitment issues. She was right. He knew she was right. Slow, he said finally. We go slow. You keep being patient. I keep being terrified. And when if the time comes for you to meet Leo, we do it carefully. No promises to him. No suggesting you're anything more than Daddy's friend. For how long? As long as it takes for me to believe you're staying. And how will you know? Daniel thought about it. I won't. Not with certainty. But maybe there comes a point where the fear of keeping you away becomes bigger than the fear of letting you in. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, I can work with, maybe. After they hung up, Daniel sat in his dark kitchen and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life, or the worst. In his bedroom, through the thin wall, he could hear Leo's gentle snoring. No matter what happened with Victoria, that sound, that proof that his son was safe and loved and sleeping peacefully, had to stay protected. Everything else was negotiable. 2 months later, 8 weeks of stolen hours and careful restraint, Victoria's phone rang at 2 a.m. She answered immediately, heart pounding. Late-night calls meant emergencies. "It's Daniel." His voice was strained. "I'm sorry to call. I know it's late. I need... What's wrong?" "My mother." She fell. Hospice called. "They're taking her to the hospital now," but his breath shook. "She's asking for me. I need to go, but Leo is asleep, and the neighbor who usually watches him isn't answering, and I can't wake him up at 2 in the morning to drag him to a hospital." "I'll come," Victoria said, already reaching for clothes. "Give me your address. I'll stay with Leo. You go." "Victoria, you don't have to." "Address." "Now." He gave it. She was in her car 4 minutes later, breaking speed limits through empty Ravenport streets. Daniel met her at the apartment door, jacket half on, keys in hand, looking like fear incarnate. "He's asleep," Daniel said rapidly. "In his room, first door on the left. He usually sleeps through the night, but if he wakes up, tell him Daddy went to see Grandma, that everything's okay, that I'll be back soon. There's juice in the fridge if he's thirsty. He has a stuffed elephant named Peanuts that he needs if he's scared. My number is Daniel." Victoria put her hands on his shoulders. "Go, I've got this. You've never met him, I know. But right now, your mother needs you, and Leo needs someone here. I'm someone. Go." He looked at her for one long moment, seeing her, really seeing her, in sweatpants and a t-shirt with no makeup, hair pulled back, standing in his shabby apartment at 2 in the morning. Then he kissed her. Fast and desperate and grateful. "Thank you," he whispered against her mouth. Then he was gone, footsteps echoing down the stairwell. Victoria stood in the quiet apartment, heart racing, and looked around. Small, clean despite being old. Furniture that was functional but worn. A kitchen table covered in Leo's drawings, crayons in a coffee can, law textbooks stacked by the couch. This was Daniel's life. The reality behind the conversations. The physical manifestation of every sacrifice she'd heard about but never quite understood. She walked quietly to Leo's room, pushed the door open gently. A small figure in superhero pajamas curled around a stuffed elephant, breathing softly. Victoria had never wanted children, had never felt the biological clock that other women talked about, had convinced herself motherhood was incompatible with the life she'd built. But looking at Daniel's son, this little person who meant everything to the man she was falling in love with, something shifted in her chest. She left the door cracked, settled on the couch with her phone, and waited. 3 a.m. came and went. At 5:30, she heard movement from Leo's room, small footsteps. Then a face appeared in the doorway, rumpled hair, sleepy eyes, clutching Peanuts the elephant. "You're not Daddy," he said. "No," Victoria said gently. "I'm Victoria. I'm your dad's friend. He had to go see your grandma, so he asked me to stay with you until he gets back." Leo processed this with the careful consideration of 7-year-olds evaluating strangers. "Are you the book lady?" Victoria blinked. "The what?" "Daddy got books. He said they were from a friend. Are you the friend?" "Yes," Victoria said. "I'm the friend." Leo padded into the living room, climbed onto the other end of the couch, studied her seriously. "Is Grandma okay?" "I don't know, honey. Your dad will call when he knows more." "Is she going to die?" The question was matter-of-fact. Too matter-of-fact for a 7-year-old who should still believe in invincibility. "Maybe," Victoria said, matching his honesty. "She's very sick." Sometimes sick people don't get better. Leo nodded, hugged Peanuts tighter. Daddy cries sometimes. At night, he thinks I'm asleep, but I hear him. Victoria's heart cracked. Your dad loves your grandma very much, and he loves you very much. Sometimes people cry when they love people, even if they're okay. Are you going to make Daddy cry? The question was so direct, so innocent, so devastating that Victoria couldn't speak for a moment. I'm going to try very hard not to, she said, finally. People always say that, then they leave anyway. Madison's dad said he'd never leave. He left. Tommy's mom said she'd never leave. She left. You're right. Sometimes people leave even when they promise they won't. And that's not fair, and it hurts. Are you going to leave? Victoria looked at this small boy Daniel's whole world and knew that whatever she said next mattered more than any business deal she'd ever negotiated. Leo, I've only known your dad for a little while, and I don't know what's going to happen with us. But I can promise you this. If I ever have to leave, it won't be because of you. It won't be because I didn't care. Sometimes, grown-ups can't stay together even when they want to. But that would be about me and your dad, not about you. Okay? Leo considered this. Then, do you like dinosaurs? The subject change was so abrupt, Victoria laughed. I don't know much about dinosaurs. I can teach you. He slid off the couch, ran to his room, returned with an armful of dinosaur books. This is a T-Rex. This is a Triceratops. This is a Velociraptor. They're smart. They hunt in packs. For the next hour, Victoria learned about dinosaurs, about continental drift and extinction events, and the difference between herbivores and carnivores. Leo narrated with the passionate expertise of a 7-year-old obsessed. Daniel called at 7 a.m. His mother had stabilized. She'd be okay for now. He'd be home within the hour. When he walked through the door at 7:45, he found Victoria and Leo on the couch, surrounded by dinosaur books, both of them laughing at something. Leo jumped up. Daddy, I taught Victoria about dinosaurs. She didn't know velociraptors were smart. Daniel looked at Victoria. She was still in sweatpants, hair messy, no makeup. She'd been awake all night in his apartment, teaching his son about dinosaurs, and she'd never looked more beautiful. Thank you, he mouthed over Leo's head. She smiled, nodded. Anytime. After Leo went to brush his teeth, a morning ritual that apparently involved detailed negotiations, Daniel pulled Victoria aside. You didn't have to stay all night. Yes, I did. Victoria said. You needed me to. Leo needed someone to. So I did. He likes you. I like him. He's got your eyes. And your ability to make complicated things simple. She touched his cheek. How's your mother? Alive. For now. They're moving her back to hospice this afternoon. He leaned into her hand. I was scared. I know. Not just about my mother. About you. About what you'd think. Seeing this. He gestured at the shabby apartment. This is my life, Victoria. Late-night emergencies and dinosaur books, and a 7-year-old who asks if people are going to leave because too many people have left already. He asked me that. What did you tell him? The truth. That I don't know what's going to happen with us, but that whatever does happen, it won't be because I didn't care. Daniel pulled her close, held her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I think I'm falling in love with you, he whispered into her hair. I think I've already fallen, she whispered back. They stood there in his tiny apartment, holding each other, while Leo sang off-key in the bathroom and morning light filtered through cheap curtains. 5 minutes had turned into 2 months. 2 months had turned into this standing together while the world kept spinning, choosing each other even when it was complicated, even when it was scary, even when every logical part of their brains said it couldn't work. I need to go home, Victoria said eventually. Shower, change. I have a board meeting at 10. Will you come back? She looked at him, really looked at him. Exhausted, scared, hoping. "Yes," she said, "if you want me to. I want you to, then I'll come back. Tonight. After work." Daniel kissed her. Slowly this time. Thoroughly. "You stayed all night," he said when they pulled apart. "I did. Thank you." "Stop thanking me, Daniel. This is what people do when they care about each other. They show up, they stay." She smiled. "Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it's scary. Even when they don't know how it ends." She left then, disappearing into the early morning light. Daniel stood in his doorway, watching her go, and realized something fundamental had shifted. The fear was still there. The worry about Leo getting hurt. The awareness of how different their worlds were. But underneath, the fear was something stronger. The certainty that Victoria Hale, billionaire, CEO, the woman who had everything, had chosen to stay all night in his shabby apartment, teaching his son about dinosaurs, not because she had to, because she wanted to, because she'd stopped seeing him as an acquisition and started seeing him as home. 3 months later, Victoria stood at the edge of Ravenport's old lighthouse pier, watching the sun set over the harbor. Behind her, on the beach, Daniel was teaching Leo how to skip stones. Their laughter carried on the wind, easy, comfortable, the sound of people who belonged together. Her assistant called. "Miss Hale, the Singapore team needs your approval on." "Tell them to handle it," Victoria said. "That's what I pay them for." "But I always micromanage. I always need to control everything. I always believe the company will fall apart without me." She watched Daniel lift Leo onto his shoulders. "Tell them to make a decision. Tell them I trust their judgment. Tell them I'll check in tomorrow." She ended the call. Tomorrow, she was supposed to be in London. A crucial merger. 6 months of negotiations coming to fruition. Instead, she was here, on a beach in Ravenport, with a bartender turned law student and his 7-year-old son who decided she needed to know about dinosaurs and space. Her board thought she'd lost her mind. She thought they might be right. "Victoria," Leo called. "Watch this." She watched him skip a stone, 3 hops across the calm water. Cheered like it was the most impressive thing she'd ever seen. Because maybe it was. Daniel walked over, left Leo hunting for more perfect stones. "You okay?" he asked. "I lost a bet," Victoria said. "What bet?" "I bet myself you wouldn't last 5 minutes. That first night at the bar. I thought you'd see the money, see the opportunity, and start calculating angles. I was pretty rude to you. You were honest. There's a difference." She turned to face him. "I thought 5 minutes, and you'd be like everyone else, trying to impress me, trying to get something from me, and instead, you stayed all night talking to me like I was a person. Then you turned me down to protect your son. Then you made me wait, made me prove myself, made me work for something I usually just acquire." Daniel smiled. "So you lost your bet, spectacularly." She took his hand. "But I think I won something better." "What's that?" "A life that doesn't feel like a prison. A man who chose principles over opportunity. A kid who teaches me about dinosaurs and calls me out when I check my phone too much at dinner. He does that to me too." "I know. You raised him right." They stood together, watching Leo play, and Victoria thought about the woman who'd walked into North Harbor Bar 4 months ago. Lonely, exhausted, convinced that success and happiness were mutually exclusive. That woman had made a bet, 5 minutes before the bartender showed his true colors. That woman had lost, and in losing, had won everything she'd been missing. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I'm keeping the London office, and Singapore, and all 12 countries, but I'm delegating. Hiring a proper COO, building a company that doesn't require me to sacrifice everything else. Because of me, because of me, because I want to be the person Leo waves to from the beach, because I want Sunday mornings in bed with you, because I want a life, not just a legacy." Daniel kissed her forehead. That's terrifying. I know. I'm terrified. Good. Fear means you're doing something that matters. Leo ran back, pockets full of stones. Victoria? Daddy says you're really rich. Is that true? Victoria and Daniel exchanged glances. Yes, Victoria said. I have a lot of money. Cool. Can we get a dinosaur? Leo. Daniel started. A fake one, Leo clarified. For the museum. They need donations, Miss Martinez said. Victoria laughed. Yes, we can get the museum a dinosaur. Yes. Leo pumped his fist, then ran back to the water. We? Daniel asked quietly. We, Victoria confirmed. If that's okay, it's okay. They watched Leo play until the sun set completely. Then they walked back to Daniel's car, his old sedan that rattled and needed a new transmission, and drove to the apartment, his small space that Leo had lived in his entire life. Victoria could have offered to move them. Penthouse in downtown Ravenport, house in the suburbs, somewhere that didn't leak when it rained. But she didn't, because Daniel wasn't a project to fix. Leo wasn't a child to rescue. Their life, complicated and messy and beautiful, wasn't something that needed optimizing. It just needed someone willing to show up, to stay, to prove that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Sometimes love was just staying all night while someone taught you about dinosaurs. Sometimes love was losing a bet you'd made with yourself about how long someone would last. Sometimes love was a billionaire and a bartender figuring out how to build something that didn't make sense on paper but made perfect sense everywhere else. That night, after Leo was asleep, after the dinosaur books were put away, Daniel and Victoria sat on his worn couch, drinking cheap wine, talking about nothing important. I'm still scared, he admitted. Me too. I don't know if this will work. Neither do I. But I want to try. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. Then we try. Scared and uncertain and completely unprepared, we try anyway. Outside, Ravenport rain started again, soft and steady and eternal. Inside, two people who'd been alone in different ways figured out how to be together in one way. And somewhere in the space between 5 minutes and forever, they both realized the best bets weren't the ones you won. They were the ones you lost and discovered something better than winning in the process. The ones where losing meant finding home.